Hi, I'm Yuval. Today I'm going to talk about what I consider one of the next frontiers of applying agility concepts using Agile and agility for developing your company or developing a company level operating system. A bit about me: I'm an Agile coach, consultant. I work with different kinds of companies on agility challenges or solving execution and growth challenges, scaling challenges using agility concepts. And as part of that work over the years, I've noticed and explored with some of my clients applying the ideas that we were using to build products in a better way to actually deal with some similar challenges elsewhere in the company. So, what are some of these challenges that I'm seeing? A repeating pattern that I've seen both in my work and when I talk to others in the industry is that a very successful company is facing growing pains that essentially affect its ability to scale to the next level. You kind of see their ability to perform, to execute, level off at some point. Some of the challenges that I've seen are a situation where it feels like people are losing the ability to innovate. They've grown very successfully to the point, but now they seem to stall. And when you look deeper, you see them struggling to cope with growing technical complexity, the coordination costs across teams. Now there are many more teams and functions. Leaders become bottlenecks. A lot of the decisions need to go through these leaders, and they feel they have to make these decisions because if they're not involved, then the wrong decisions get made. This affects both product innovation as well as things related to go to market. How do we do that? How do we build different functions, especially as we start to work on cross-functional or cross-cutting initiatives, such as, for example, we have a churn issue in our subscription model. How do we tackle that? That's not just something that sits within customer success, if we even have that. It's not something that salespeople can deal with on their own, not the product people, not marketing. It requires some sort of collaboration. Whenever you have this sort of collaboration, the ability to innovate is even harder than doing something within a function. Another thing that I often see is time to market or time to money or learning grows longer and longer. The more complex, the larger the organization, the more functions and specialization, the more time it takes to deliver value or close a learning loop that tells us whether we're in the right direction or not. In most of my work with companies, I see an environment of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity. And in these sort of environments, while it might seem attractive to do some planning up front and have a plan for how to tackle this big, important initiative that we have as the company's leadership, there's a limit to how far those plans can sustain you. As Mike Tyson said, your plan is only as good as you get hit until you get hit by the face by your opponent. So people that create plans, big plans up front, and try to stick to them often see that the results are sitting on the shelf, not really implemented, not really useful, frustrating people. We've learned how to do things differently in product development, but we struggle to implement this thinking in wider business change or business development or company development concepts. Another thing that we're seeing as companies are scaling is that they're losing key talent. They're losing people that are looking for an environment where they can thrive, have the right level of autonomy. People feel stuck within or in a cage within some of the more mature processes, what seems like more mature processes and reporting line. As the organization scales, we have this pattern where people that thrive in startups are not the sort of people that thrive in bigger companies. And as the organization starts to scale, we start to see that friction. We have people that struggle to enjoy their work. They might not be as effective, and eventually they might, feel stuck and move to a greener field. Another thing that we see is a situation where we lose sight of our customers. Why are we doing these things? Whether it's the real external customer, whether it's the internal customer of a process that we're creating. I was working with a biotech firm where, even working on something as internal as a process for employee benefits, there was the temptation to just follow best practices and what's easy for finance and people operations, and lose sight of the actual customer, which is the employees in the organization and what enables them. There's this notion of stewardship and taking care of the people that you're supporting, whether those are your external customers or your internal customers. That's something that's hard to achieve as well, the larger the company is. So what do we do about that? What we could do is take the ideas that have served us in product development. Those ideas could be called agility. Essentially, what we're talking about is some sort of mix of identifying what are the empowered teams that we need, focusing them on clear missions, clear goals, and letting them explore, letting them figure out what's the right solution, and letting them, build something, whether that thing is a product or a process or a way of working, organizational policies, whatever. Try it out, measure the impact based on evidence, learn and close fast cycles as quickly as possible. You might call this approach OKRs. You might call this approach distributed leadership, nimble, DevOps, lean startup, Scrum. I don't really care about the name. I care about which of these principles can really be useful, and I've seen them really do wonders for organizations when they lift the same principles that worked in product development and use them to build a business operating system that applies these agile approaches. Whether it's to how sales and marketing collaborate, if you want to call it RevOps, how they can work in cross-functional teams to think about and play with different plays or experiments for how to improve the sales funnel, the conversion funnel, whether you might call it growth hacking, or all the way to how the C-suite or senior executives are working as a team on the biggest strategic challenges the company is facing. How do we identify, surface leap of faith assumptions in our business model, and how can we move both with strategic focus, but also with the ability to assume optionality, preserve options, react to what we're seeing, even at that level. This new business operating system, if you want to call it that, typically requires some, at least virtual organization, to teams or people that would work together, that would own a certain experience, a certain value, a certain business process. It requires the adoption of evidence and data-driven ways of working, or even metrics. it requires shifting away from some traditional behaviors that aren't as effective. For example, it requires shifting away from a leadership style that requires, a big plan and conviction up front to a leadership style that provides clarity on what's important, what is the mission that we're trying to achieve, but then empowering people to figure out how to actually achieve this mission and how to actually work together. It includes, when we do this, it includes work on establishing focus, establishing flow, working on empiricism versus, a defined process where everything is assumed upfront. And also, the realization that there's no, process out of the box that can really do this for your organization. This isn't, methodology that comes out of the box. It's just using these first principles and critical thinking to evolve how you're currently doing things towards this more dynamic operating system. If you want to look at something that describes the essence of this agility, I really like the definitions in evidence-based management, the framework that was created by scrum.org. And this framework is also nice because it can be used to assess how you're doing on this journey towards being an evidence-based managed company. Are we operating according to these principles? Where are some opportunities for us to improve in our ability to innovate, our time to market or value? What's the current value that we're creating for each one of our key both external products and internal experiences, internal key processes, and what are some unrealized potential or dissatisfaction gaps that we want to focus on. The nice thing about this framework is that it doesn't tell you how to actually work. It tells you what to pay attention to. And that's a useful abstraction layer. So in recent years, I've been working with more and more companies that are applying this evidence-based agile operating system beyond product. We typically start with the product organization, but then you might call it land and expand the ideas of the product organization towards marketing, towards the leadership team, towards a strategic initiative, towards implementing an investment thesis from private equity. Those could be different triggers to upgrade the company operating system. And sometimes the trigger is just leaders that really like what they're seeing in one area and want to bring it in. A CMO might look at how the product development organization is doing and might see things that they like and some problems in their own organization and might bring these ideas into the marketing organization. A CRO might bring it to the interaction between all of the revenue-related organizations when they're trying to really transform how the organization is driving. A chief transformation officer is another example of a typical person inside the organization that might bring this idea in to help drive transformational initiatives. Chief of staff or COO or chief strategy, who's ever responsible for OKRs, might be really frustrated with how the organization is executing on these OKRs, BHAGs, whatever you want to call them, and use these ideas to actually improve the ability to deploy the strategic intent of the organization. Now, this doesn't mean, by the way, that all of the company needs to operate this way, that all of the company needs to be managed in an evidence-based manner. This way of working is especially useful when developing aspects of the company, developing product, services, or developing the company. Running ongoing operations might or might not require this way of working. So if we have something that's pretty stable, say, customer success, answering, the phone, doing hiring, replenishment, or any other ongoing business operations that don't have a lot of uncertainty and knowledge work in them, they might not require this activity on a day-to-day basis, or they might not require this way of working on a day-to-day basis, but they will typically benefit from this way of looking at things when you want to transform how you're running these operations. So this is the key difference: developing aspects of the company and running aspects of the company. So one thing you could try is, once you come up with your strategy for the quarter, year, whether it's your OKRs, BHAGs, ROCs, whatever, assess each one of these items according to uncertainty, complexity, dependency, or breadth across the organization, impact, intended impact, or risk. Then based on this analysis, choose the ones that you think would benefit the most from an evidence-based management approach. These would be the ones with the highest uncertainty, complexity, most dependent items, and that have the most impact on the organization. And think about, how could we manage them in this sort of way? How would we apply these principles that I've talked about to these big rocks, to these strategic goals? And that might mean organizing a cross-functional, empowered, focus team of the people inside the organization, and maybe even external subject matter experts, if that's relevant. It will work in short cycles to create useful increments that guide us or give us some empirical feedback on where are we, and enable us to review and adjust course if needed. It might mean creating just high-level goals, focusing on outcomes, and providing people with clarity on why are we doing this now, why are we making this bet, while giving these people the space to explore what's the best way to actually achieve these outcomes, via an understanding that there would be some trial and error in the trenches, having the patience for experimentation. More often than not, these strategic interventions will need to occur in parallel to actually running the business. And running the business is hard as ever. It's like replacing the engine mid-flight. And that means that we often see people that are struggling to balance their day job. That's, let's call it company one, the current company that needs to continue running, and transformation work. You can call it developing company two, the one we are working to create. And there's, obviously the question, how much capacity to assign to each? How do we juggle this day job and transformation job as part of the same work bucket? Who would be in charge of each type of work? How do we mediate when there are conflicts between company one and company two? What I do hear from CEOs in these situations is that they frequently need to get involved in resolving these conflicts between the day-to-day and the transformation, which results in delays, frustrations, a feeling of disempowerment by people. And if this transformation also happens along bigger company changes, like new leadership, new investors, owners, the environment is even more volatile. Another common friction or frustration area is goal setting. What should we focus on now? What's realistic to achieve? Do we involve people who will do the actual work in the goal setting? At what level? OKRs are a popular goal setting mechanism, but are not as trivial to implement as they might seem. One common anti-pattern is to set too many OKRs top down. Maybe a better way is to provide alignment via the objectives and let the teams come back with realistic key results. There's, more to say, and I have other. I talked about OKRs and how to use them well in other opportunities, so I'm gonna put that aside for now. The bottom line is that this balancing act between the operational and transformational or developmental work, the alignment, the autonomy of people, is a key area for focus when we're talking about business or organizational agility. And in my experience, patterns that we use in IT, in product development, like product ownership and developers, they sound very IT centric or technology centric, and they carry baggage with them that um, might be difficult to use in other domains. But there's some of the essence behind these concepts that can be useful. So the translation of the essence of elements from what has proven to work really well for product development can be used by the company level operating system or company level agility, but it's not a direct mapping in my experience. You really need to be careful both with the language you use, explaining it, as well as picking and choosing the aspects that do make sense. One of the other common signs of trouble is when teams are overly dependent on other teams, to the point that progress is gridlocked. And teams and their leaders spend precious time coordinating, managing across the organization rather than executing, doing real work. And this gets really frustrated for people. People, a lot of the time start to blame even the techniques that are used to help. So you hear developers, for example, really complaining and blaming things like the daily Scrum and Scrum's planning sessions, while the culprit here is typically the fact that you don't even have the right teams. The teams need to talk to other teams, and you try to solve all of these problems by adding more and more coordination, more and more structure and management layers, whether it's artifacts, whether it's events, whether it's people like PMOs, project managers, and the like. And a preferred, more scalable play, I would, in what I've seen, is to reorganize around value, to rethink about who needs to work together based on what are our strategic goals, what are our internal business processes, internal products, external products, and bring together the people that would need to collaborate closely to develop, maintain, advance these products and internal experiences, to work more closely together and create teams which are empowered to actually run on these topics, that can self-manage with minimal overhead, minimum process, just by getting the right people into the room. We have this saying in the Agile world of individuals and interactions. Let's get the right people together, let them have the effective interactions. Once you do that, the process is less relevant. They can use certain processes, but they don't have to. These teams might include people from different functions. For example, we might see product management, marketing, sales enablement, or finance, legal, and HR work together, depending on what are we trying to accomplish. This should be aligned with the key initiatives we're focused on, as well as what are products, the internal products for the organization and the products for the organization's customer. So if we take a step back and look at all of this, I really think this is the new frontier for agility. Agile, was born in software development. It's been widely adopted in IT and product and technology organizations. There's little argument that product technology organizations should operate using agility principles. Whether you want to argue on Scrum, Safe, whatever, that's a side conversation, but it's rare for people to argue around the fact that we need to run fast feedback loops. We want to have good flow, minimize the amount of things that we're working on so that we don't get to too much cognitive overload, empower people to make as many of the decisions as possible, and make sure that they're aligned towards the mission. For me, that's, by the way, agility. And more recently, we see other functions adopting those same principles, as well as some of the practices. This is, for me, a useful milestone on the journey towards real organizational agility, but I also see it as a stopgap measure, because the next frontier, I think, is not agile marketing or agile sales or agile development. The next frontier is, a more holistic definition of what we mean by development. The development of the company's capabilities. And developing the company's capabilities, we include whoever is needed in the organization to go and do that. So it's less agile in silos, it's agile across silos, and figuring out how to bring those silos together. So this is my thinking on what's the new frontier for agility. Hope this resonates for you. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, or reach out if you want to discuss further and hear more about what my experience has been around this. Have a great day, everybody.